Hey folks, this is Steel Table Talk and I'm Kavya. This is the sixth video in the ICSE Drama series covering the first part of Act 1, Scene 2 of The Merchant of Venice by William Shakespeare. This video contains everything from the broadest concepts to the minutest details that you require to write the perfect answers. So keep watching and stay tuned for more. So scene 2 opens in Belmont, a room in Portia's house, which is essentially to be written as a room in Portia's house in Belmont. Portia and Nerissa enter. Now, the locations of this act, this entire play will alternate between Venice and Belmont. So, Portia and Nerissa enter the scene. Portia says, "By my troth, Nerissa, my little body is aweary of this great world." Means, I swear, Nerissa, my little body is tired of this great big world, all its complications and everything. Nerissa says, "You would be, sweet madam, if your miseries were in the same abundance as your good fortunes are." So Nerissa here replies gives a very witty reply to Portia and says, "Yeah, you would be tired if your miseries, if your misfortunes, your sorrows were as many and as great as your fortunes, your good fortunes. But it is not the case. And yet, for aught I see, they are as sick that surfeit with too much as they that starve with nothing." So she says, this is not the case with you. So I'm going to apply a different reasoning. For all I have seen, relying on my experience, people who have too much of everything are just as unfortunate as those who have nothing. Here she used the context of food, being overfed or starving. So she says people who are overfed also get sick, just as people who do not have anything to eat also starve and become sick. It is no mean happiness, therefore, to be seated in the mean. Superfluity comes sooner by white hairs, but competency lives longer. She says that, therefore, in her opinion, the happiness that comes, the joy that comes from being in the middle, being situated in the middle of excess and dearth, means too much and too little, is no small achievement. It is an achievement, it is a great achievement, great feat in itself. She says that people who have too much of everything, who have surplus of abundance of everything, get grey hair, or their hair becomes white sooner than those who have just enough means to live comfortably. Now here please note the double usage of the word mean. It is no mean happiness, little happiness, small happiness, therefore, to be seated in the mean, to be situated in the middle. It is no little happiness to be situated in the middle. Portia then says, "Good sentences and well pronounced." She in a way applauds her servant, her lady-in-waiting sort of. Nerissa says, "They would be better if well followed." Another witty reply. Nerissa is big on humor. She says, "My sentences would turn out to be better if you would make use of them and follow this advice." Portia says, "If to do were as easy as to know what were good to do, chapels had been churches and poor men's cottages, princes' palaces." Portia, the queen of drama, says that if it was as easy to do the right thing, as easy as it is to know what the right thing is. So she basically compares the knowledge of the right thing with actual actions that do the right thing. She says it is easier to know what the right thing is than to do the right thing. If it were not so, then two things. Number one, chapels had been churches. Chapels are small shrines, roadway shrines. Not actually roadway shrines, but churches are basically large, huge establishments, whereas chapels are like a place of worship, only a hall with a limited number of pews and very small number of people who can gather there and pray to God. No big monuments or statues are required in chapels. So chapels are like smaller churches, and churches are big establishments. Small shrines would become big churches. And what is the second thing? Poor men's cottages, princes' palaces. Peasants' huts would become grand royal palaces. It is a good divine that follows his own instructions. I can easier teach 20 what were good to be done than be one of those 20 to follow mine own teaching. Only a good preacher can follow his own teachings, and naturally not everyone is a good preacher, Portia included. She says Portia herself could more easily instruct 20 people about the right thing to do than be one of those 20 people and follow her own things, do the right thing that she believes in. The brain may devise laws for the blood, but a hot temper leaps over a cold decree. The brain, the mind, the sense, the voice of reason may frame rules for the body, but in the heat of youthful passion, all these rules or laws, regulations seem cold, unattractive. Such a hare is madness the youth, to skip over the measures of good counsel the cripple. And so the madness of frenzy of youth avoids, skips over an unattractive or monotonous piece of good advice, in a similar fashion as a hare or rabbit skips over a trap, a net. Alright. This is important, this last paragraph that is on your screen. The brain may frame rules for the body. The brain till good counsel the cripple. Many times we see a question, explain this. But this reasoning is not in the fashion to choose me a husband. Oh me, the word choose. I may neither choose whom I would, nor refuse whom I dislike. So is the will of a living daughter curbed by the will of a dead father. Is it not hard, Nerissa, that I cannot choose one nor refuse none? Now, Portia has given a wise lecture about telling others to do the right thing, knowing what is the right thing to do, and actually doing the right thing. And then she goes on to say, but these wise discussions do not apply in the case of my marriage. Portia notes the irony of the word choose in the matter of her choosing a husband for herself, as her choice has been crippled, trampled by the will of her father. This will refuses her the freedom of choosing the one she liked, the man she liked, or rejecting any man she disliked. She laments that her, a living person's will, wish, desire is overshadowed by her father's, a dead man's will, legal will. This business of having no choice in the choosing of her own husband is exceptionally hard for her. Again, there is double play in the usage of will. First, as wish, the will of a living daughter, the wishes, desires of a living daughter, curbed, overpowered by the will of a dead father, will, legal document of a dead father. Now, Nerissa defends Portia's father in saying, your father was ever virtuous. She also makes an attempt at consoling Portia by saying this means, relax, your father was a great man, wise man, and whatever he has decided for you, there must be a reason, and it's all going to be just fine. She says that her father was a wise and virtuous man, and holy men at their death have good inspirations. And pious men like himself receive divine inspirations. Inspirations are like an idea to do something. Sometimes inspiration like a muse, an artist's muse, which gives them the idea, motivates them to do something, to make an artwork or a decision or a revelation, a theory, something like that. At the time of their death, virtuous, pious, wise men receive divine inspirations. Therefore, the lottery that he hath devised in these 3 chests of gold, silver, and lead, whereof who chooses his meaning chooses you, will no doubt never be chosen by any rightly, but one who shall love rightly. So she says, thus the lottery of caskets devised by your father on his deathbed must have been out of some holy motivation to ensure Portia achieving, marrying the right husband. By asking the suitors to choose between 3 caskets of gold, silver, and lead, Portia's father has ensured that only the suitor who chooses the right meaning and thus the right casket will earn Portia as his wife. Therefore, this method has its own merits, which may not reveal themselves to Portia at the current moment, but they will come out in the due course of time. Through this method, only the man who loves you truly, will be able to make the right choice and thus earn you in marriage. Then, to lighten the gloomy mood, she changes her subject and says, "But what warmth is there in your affection towards any of these princely suitors that are already come?" Now, Bassanio has said, suitors come, rich noble suitors come from all four corners of the world to woo Portia. Nerissa now asks that out of all these royal suitors who have already come to woo you, to earn your affections, what are your feelings, your thoughts? What is your take on them? Portia says, "I pray thee overname them, and as thou namest them, I will describe them, and according to my description, level at my affection." Portia asks Nerissa to name those candidates, those suitors, and as Nerissa would name them, Portia would describe them, and according to Portia's description of each of these suitors, Nerissa can make an estimate of the level of affection she has in her heart for each one of them. Nerissa says, "Okay, first there is the Neapolitan prince." Portia, "Aye, that's a colt indeed, for he doth nothing but talk of his horse, and he makes it a great appropriation to his own good parts that he can shoe him himself." Neapolitan prince, Neapolitan refers to the country Naples. So Neapolitan prince means prince of the country Naples. Now there is a pun on colt in Portia's reply. She says, "Aye, that's a colt indeed." Now colt means two. Colt has two meanings in this context. Number one, young horse. Portia compared the Neapolitan prince to a colt. Why? Because of his obsession with his horse. She says he does nothing but talk of his horse. Number two, second meaning is inexperienced young man. So Portia calls him colt in this respect because he thinks that it is a great achievement for himself that he can shoe his own horse. Shoe means attaching the metal horseshoe to the hoof of a horse. Portia calls the Neapolitan prince a colt and explain the meaning of the colts as I've just said, because all he does is talk about his horse, and she says that he considers being able to shoe his own horse a great feat. Great appropriation to his own good parts means a great addition to his own achievements or merits. Now, next is Nerissa. Then there is the County Palatine. County Palatine means the count, a local ruler or nobleman from the region of Palatinate. Portia, he doth nothing but frown, as who should say, "If you will not have me, choose." He hears merry tales and smiles not. Now, this candidate sounds very much like someone we have heard so much about. Now, I'm confused between Graciano's dumb-wise men or the second category of unlaughing men in Salerno's speech by two-headed Janus, who do not laugh even when Nestor swore that the joke was funny. So, County Palatine sounds exactly like that. Portia comments that the Count has an ever-frowning face. His expression seems to say, "If you do not want to have me, it is your choice, don't have me." He does not smile even upon hearing stories of joy, merry tales. I fear he will prove the weeping philosopher when he grows old, being so full of unmannerly sadness in his youth. She is afraid that this Count will turn out to be the weeping philosopher, reference will be explained later, in his old age, as he is already brimming with unnatural or unpleasant gloom in the days of his youth. This gloom is so overpowering that it is unpleasant for those surrounding him. I had rather be married to a death's head with a bone in his mouth than to either of these. God defend me from these two. Now, this death's head is the emblem of a skull with two bones crossed underneath, the danger symbol which we see so often. Portia says that she would prefer to be married to the death's head, this danger symbol than to either of these two men. She prays to God to save her from them. Now, reference, weeping philosopher. It refers to Heraclitus of Ephesus, a philosopher who always had a melancholy disposition. He was a Greek philosopher who lamented the stupidity and folly of mankind. He was always like, humans cannot see anything and therefore they live a worthless life and all that. So, he is contrasted often with the laughing philosopher Democritus, but that is not required here. Anyways, rest of it will continue later. There are 6 suitors whose descriptions are detailed here, 2 of which have been done, the rest 4 in the next video. I will also be writing down point by point description of these for the answers. So, yeah, drop a like, hit subscribe, turn on notifications to stay informed of new videos. Stay strong, stay safe, keep faith. See ya.